AylmerÂ filled Alfred Lord Tennyson dust are our frames. And gilded dust, our pride looks only for a moment whole and sound. Like that long buried body of a king, found lying with his urns and ornaments, which at a touch of light, and air of heaven, slipped into ashes and was found no more. Here is a story which in rougher shape came from a grizzled cripple, whom I saw sunning himself in a waste field alone, old, and a mine of memories, who had served, long since, a bygone rector of the place, and been himself a part of what he told. Sir Aylmer, that almighty man, the county god in whose capacious hall, hung with 100 shields, the family tree sprang from the midriff of a prostrate king, whose blazing wyvern weathercocked the spire, stood from his walls and winged his entry gates, and swung besides on many a windy sign, whose eyes from under a pyramidal head saw from his windows nothing save his own. What lovelier of his own had he than her, his only child, his Edith, whom he loved as heiress, and not heir regretfully? But he that marries her name. This fiat somewhat soothed himself and wife, his wife a faded beauty of the baths, insipid as the queen upon a card. Her all of thought and bearing hardly more than his own shadow in a sickly sun. A land of hops and poppy mingled corn, little about it stirring save a brook. A sleepy land where under the same wheel the same old rut would deepen year by year. Where almost all the village had one name. Where Aylmer followed Aylmer at the hall, and Averill at the rectory thrice over. So that rectory and hall, bound in an immemorial intimacy, were open to each other. Though to dream that love could bind them closer well had made the hoar hair of the baronet bristle up with horror, worse than had he heard his priest preach an inverted scripture, sons of men, daughters of God. So sleepy was the land. And might not Averill, had he willed it so, somewhere beneath his own low range of roofs, have also set his many shielded tree? There was an Aylmer-Averill marriage once, when the red rose was redder than itself, and York's white rose as red as Lancaster's, with wounded peace which each had pricked to death. Not proven, Averill said, or laughingly some other race of Averills proven or no, what cared he? What, if other are the same? He'll not on his fathers but himself. But Llewellyn, his brother, living oft with Averill, and a year or two before called to the bar, but ever called away by one low voice to one dear neighborhood, would often, in his walks with Edith, claim a distant kinship to the gracious blood that shook the heart of Edith hearing him. Sanguine he was, a but less vivid hue than of that islet in the chestnut bloom flamed his cheek. And eager eyes, that still took joyful note of all things joyful, beamed beneath a man-like mass of rolling gold, their best and brightest, when they dwelt on hers. Edith, whose pensive beauty, perfect else, but subject to the season or the mood, shone like a mystic star between the less and greater glory varying to and fro, we know not wherefore. Bounteously made, and yet so finely, that a troublous touch thinned or would seem to thin her in a day, a joyous to dilate, as tar delight. And these had been together from the first. Llewellyn's first nurse was, 5 years after, hers, so much the boy foreran. But when his date doubled her own, for want of playmates, he, since Averill was a decad and a half his elder, and their parents underground had tossed his ball and flown his kite, and rolled his hoop to pleasure Edith, with her dipped against the rush of the air in the prone swing, made blossom ball or daisy chain, arranged her garden, sewed her name and kept it green in living letters, told her fairy tales, showed here the fair footings on the grass, the little dells of cowslip, fairy palms, the paddy merry stale forest, fairy pines, or from the tiny pit a target blew what looked a flight of fairy arrows aimed all at one mark, all hitting, make-believes for Edith and himself, or else he forged, but that was later, boyish histories of battle, bold adventure, dungeon, wreck, flights, terrors, sudden rescues, and true love crowned after trial. Sketches rude and faint, but where a passion yet unborn perhaps lay hidden as the music of the moon's leaps in the plain eggs of the nightingale. And thus together, save for college times or temperleton terms, a couple, fair as ever painter painted, poet sang, or heathen in lavish bounty molded, grew. And more, the maiden woman grown, he wasted hours with Averill. There, when first the tented winter field was broken up into that phalanx of the summer spears that soon should wear the garland. There again when burn bine were gathered Lastly there at Christmas, ever welcome at the hall, on whose dull sameness his full tide of youth broke with a phosphorescence cheering even my lady. And the baronet yet had laid no bar between them, dull and self-involved, tall and erect, but bending from his height with half-allowing smiles for all the world, and mighty courteous in the main. His pride lay deeper than to wear it as his ring. He, like an Aylmer in his Aylmerism, would care no more for Leolin's walking with her than for his old Newfoundland's, when they ran to loose him at the stables, for he rose 12-footed at the limit of his chain, roaring to make a third, and how should love, whom the cross lightnings of forechance met eyes flash into fiery life from nothing, follow such dear familiarities of dawn? Seldom, but when he does, master of all. So these young hearts, not knowing that they loved, not she at least, nor conscious of a bar between them, nor by plight or broken ring bound, but in immemorial intimacy, wandered at will, but oft accompanied by a real, his, a brother's love, that hung with wings of brooding shelter o'er her peace, might have been other, save for Leolin's, who knows? But so they wandered hour by hour gathered the blossom that rebloomed and drank the magic cup that filled itself anew. A whisper half revealed her to herself. For out beyond her lodges, where the brook vocal, with here and there a silence, ran by sallowy rims, arose the laborers' homes, a frequent haunt of Edith, on low knolls that dimpling died into each other, huts at random scattered each a nest and bloom. Her art, her hand, her counsel all had wrought about them. Here was one that, summer blanched was parcel bearded with the traveller's joy in autumn, parcel ivy clad. And here the warm blue breathings of a hidden hearth broke from a bower of vine and honeysuckle. One looked all rostry, and another wore a close-set robe of jasmine sewn with stars. This had a rosy sea of gillyflowers about it. This, a milky way on earth, like visions in the northern dreamer's heavens, a lily avenue climbing to the doors. One, almost to the martin-haunted eaves, a summer burial deep in hollyhocks. Each, its own charm, and Edith's everywhere. And Edith ever visitant with him, he but less loved than Edith, of her poor, for she so lowly lovely and so loving, quaintly responsive when the loyal hand rose from the clay it worked in as she passed, not sowing heterotexan passing by, nor dealing goodly counsel from a height that makes the lowest hate it, but a voice of comfort and an open hand of help, a splendid presence flattering the poor roofs revered as theirs, but kindlier than themselves to wailing wife or wailing infancy or old bedridden palsy, was adored. He, loved for her and for himself. A grasp having the warmth and muscle of the heart, a childly way with children, and a laugh ringing like proved golden coinage true, were no false passport to that easy realm, where once with Leolin at her side the girl, nursing a child, and turning to the warmth the tender pink five-beaded baby souls, heard the good mother softly whisper God bless him. Marriages are made in heaven. A flash of semi-jealousy cleared it to her. My lady's Indian kinsman unannounced with half a score of swarthy faces came. His own, though keen and bold and soldierly, seared by the close ecliptic, was not fair. Fairer his talk, a tongue that ruled the hour, though seeming boastful, so when first he dashed into the chronicle of a deedful day, Sir Aylmer half forgot his lazy smile of patron good. My lady's kinsman. Good. My lady with her fingers interlocked and rotatory thumbs on silken knees, called all her vital spirits into each ear to listen. Unawares they flitted off, busying themselves about the flowerage that stood from our stiff brocade in which, the meteor of a splendid season, she, once with this kinsman, so long ago, stepped through the stately minuet of those days. But Edith's eager fancy hurried with him snatched through the perilous passes of his life, till Leolin ever watchful of her eye hated him with a momentary hate. Wife hunting, as the rumor ran, was he, I know not, for he spoke not, only showered his oriental gifts on everyone and most on Edith. Like a storm he came, and shook the house, and like a storm he went. Among the gifts he left her, possibly he flowed and ebbed uncertain, to return when others had been tested. There was one, a dagger, in rich sheath with jewels on it sprinkled about in gold that branched itself fine as ice ferns on January panes made by a breath. I know not whence at first, nor of what race, the work. But as he told the story, Storming a hill fort of thieves he got it. For their captain after fight, his comrades having fought their last below, was climbing up the valley, at whom he shot, down from the beetling crag to which he clung tumbled the tawny rascal at his feet, this dagger with him, which when now admired by Edith, whom his pleasure was to please, at once the costly sahib yielded it to her. And Llewellyn, coming after he was gone, tossed over all her presents petulantly, and when she showed he the wealthy scabbard, saying look what a lovely piece of workmanship. Slight was his answer, well I care not for it. Then playing with the blade he pricked his hand, a gracious gift to give a lady, this. But would it be more gracious, asked the girl, were I to give this gift of his to one that is no lady? Gracious? No, said he. Me? But I cared not for it. Oh, pardon me, I seem to be ungraciousness itself. Take it, she added sweetly, though his gift. For I am more ungracious even than you, I care not for it either. And he said, why then I love it. But Sir Aylmer passed, and neither loved nor liked the thing he heard. The next day came a neighbor. Blues and reds they talked of, blues were sure of it, he thought, then of the latest fox were started killed in such a bottom. Peter had the brush, my Peter, first, and did Sir Aylmer know that great pock-pitten fellow had been caught? Then made his pleasure echo, hand to hand, and rolling as it were the substance of it between his palms a moment up and down. The birds were warm, the birds were warm upon him. We have him now, and had Sir Aylmer heard nay, but he must, the land was ringing of it, this blacksmith border marriage one they knew raw from the nursery. Who could trust a child? That cursed France with her egalities. And did Sir Aylmer, deferentially with nearing chair and lowered accent, think for people talked that it was wholly wise to let that handsome fellow Averill walk so freely with his daughter? People talked the boy might get a notion into him? The girl might be entangled she knew. Sir Aylmer slowly stiffening spoke, the girl and boy, sir, know their differences. Good, said his friend, but watch. And he enough, more than enough, sir. I can guard my own. They parted, and Sir Aylmer watched pale, for on her the thunders of the house had fallen first, was Edith that same night. Pale as the Jephthah's daughter, a rough piece of early rigid color, under which withdrawing by the counter door to that which Llewellyn opened she cast back upon him a piteous glance, and vanished he, as one caught in a burst of unexpected storm, and pelted with outrageous epithets, turning beheld the powers of the house on either side the hearth, indignant. Her, cooling her false cheek with a feather fan, him glaring, by his own stale devil spurred and, like a beast hard ridden, breathing hard. Ungenerous, dishonorable, base, presumptuous. Trusted as he was with her, the sole successor to their wealth, their lands, the last remaining pillar of their house, the one transmitter of their ancient name, their child. Our child. Our heiress. Ours. For still, like echoes from beyond a hollow, came her sick lyre iteration. Last he said, boy, mark me. For your fortunes are to make. I swear you shall not make them out of mine. Now inasmuch as you have practiced on her, perplexed her, made her half forget herself, swerved from her duty to herself and us, things in an Aylmer deemed impossible, far as we track ourselves, I say that this, else I withdraw favor and countenance from you, and yours forever shall you do. Sir, when you see her, but you shall not see her, no, you shall write, and not to her, but me, and you shall say that having spoken with me, and after looked into yourself, you find that you meant nothing, as indeed you know that you meant nothing. Such a match as this. Impossible, prodigious. These were words, as meted by his measure of himself, arguing boundless forbearance, after which, and Llewellyn's horror-stricken answer, I so foul a traitor to myself and her, never or never, for about as long as the wind overhangs in the balance, paused Sir Aylmer, reddening from the storm within, then broke all bonds of courtesy, and crying, boy, should I find you by my doors again, my men shall lash you from the like a dog. Hence. With a sudden execration drove the footstool from before him, and arose. So, stammering scoundrel, out of teeth that ground as in a dreadful dream, while Llewellyn still retreated half aghast, the fierce old man followed and under his own lintel stood storming with lifted hands, a hour face meet for the reverence of the hearth, But now, beneath a pale and unimpassioned moon, vexed with unworthy madness, and deformed slowly and conscious of the rageful eye that watched him, till he heard the ponderous door close, crashing with long echoes through the land, went Llewellyn. Then, his passions all in flood and masters of his motion, furiously down through the bright lawns to his brother's ran, and foamed away his heart at Averial's ear, whom Averial solaced as he might, amazed. The man was had been his father's friend. He must have seen, himself had seen it long. He must have known, himself had known. Besides, he never yet had set his daughter forth here in the woman markets of the West, where our Caucasians let themselves be sold. Someone, he thought, had slandered Llewellyn to him. Brother, for I have loved you more as a son than brother, let me tell you, I myself what is their pretty saying? Jilted is it? Jilted I was, I say it for your peace. Pained and, as bearing in myself the shame the woman should have borne, humiliated, I lived for years a stunted sunless life. Till after our good parents passed away watching your growth, I seemed again to grow. Llewellyn, I almost sin in envying you, the very whitest lamb in all my fold loves you. I know her, the worst thought she has is whiter even than her pretty hand. She must prove true, for, brother, where to fight the strongest wins, and truth and love are strength, and you are happy, let her parents be. But Llewellyn cried out the more upon them insolent, brainless, heartless heiress, wealth, their heiress. Wealth enough was theirs for 20 matches. Were he lords of this, why, 20 boys and girls should marry on it, and 40 blessed ones bless him, and himself be wealthy still, wealthier. He believed this filthy marriage hindering mammon made a harlot of the cities. Nature crossed was mother of the foul adulteries that saturate soul with body. Name, too. Name, their ancient name. They might be proud. Its worth was being Edith's. Ah, how pale she had looked, darling, tonight. They must have rated her beyond all tolerance. These old pheasant lords, these partridge breeders of 1,000 years, who had mildewed in their thousands, doing nothing since Egbert, why, the greater their disgrace. Fall back upon a name. Rest, rot in that. Not keep it noble, make it nobler? Fools, with such a vantage ground for nobleness. He had known a man, a quintessence of man, the life of all who madly loved, and he, thwarted by one of these old father fools, had rioted his life out, and made an end. He would not do it. Her sweet face and faith held him from that, but he had powers, he knew it, back would he to his studies, make a name, fortune too, the world should ring of him to shame these mouldy Aylmers in their graves. Chancellor, or what is greatest would he be? O brother, I am grieved to learn your grief. Give me my fling, and let me say my say. At which, like one that sees his own excess, and easily forgives it as his own, he laughed and then was mute. But presently wept like a storm, and honest Averial, seeing how low his brother's mood had fallen, fetched his richest bees wing from a bin reserved for banquets, praised the waning red, and told the vintage when this Aylmer came of age, then drank and passed it. Till at length the two, though Llewellyn flamed and fell again, agreed that much allowance must be made for men. After an angry dream this kindlier glow faded with morning, but his purpose held. Yet once by night again the lovers met, a perilous meeting under the tall pines that darkened all the northward of her hall. Him, to her meek and modest bosom pressed in agony, she promised that no force, persuasion, no, nor death could alter her. He, passionately hopefuller, would go, labor for his own Edith, and return in such a sunlight of prosperity he should not be rejected. Write to me. They loved me, and because I love their child they hate me. There is war between us, dear, which breaks all bonds but ours. We must remain sacred to one another. So they talked, poor children, for their comfort. The wind blew, the rain of heaven, and their own bitter tears, and the careless rain of heaven, mixed upon their faces, as they kissed each other in darkness, and above them roared the pine. So Llewellyn went. And as we task ourselves to learn a language known but smatteringly in phrases here and there at random, toiled mastering the lawless science of our law, that caudeless myriad of precedent, that wilderness of single instances, through which a few, by wit or fortune led, may beat a pathway out to wealth and fame. The jest, that flashed about the pleader's room, lightning of the hour, the pun, the scurrilous tale, old scandals buried now 7 decades deep in other scandals that have lived and died, and left the living scandal that shall die were dead to him already. Bent as he was to make disproof of scorn, and strong in hopes, and prodigal of all brain labor he, charier of sleep, and wine and exercise, except when for a breathing while at eve, some niggard fraction of an hour, he ran beside the river bank, and then indeed harder the times were, and the hands of power were bloodier, and the according hearts of men seemed harder too. But the soft river breeze, which found the gardens of that rival rose yet fragrant in a heart remembering his former talks with Edith, on him breathed far purer in his rushings to and fro, after his books, to flesh his blood with air, then to his books again. My lady's cousin, half sickening of his pensioned afternoon, drove in upon the student once or twice, ran a Malayan muck against the times, had golden hopes for France and all mankind, answered all queries touching those at home with a heave shoulder and a saucy smile, and fain had hauled him out into the world, and ere him there, his nearer friend would say screw not the cord too sharply lest it snap. Then left alone he plucked her dagger forth from where his worldless heart had kept it warm, kissing his vows upon it like a knight. And wrinkled benchers often talked of him approvingly, and prophesied his rise, for heart, I think, helped head, her letters too, though far between, and coming fitfully like broken music, written as she found or made occasion, being strictly watched charmed him through every labyrinth till he saw an end, a hope, a light breaking upon him. But they that cast her spirit into flesh, her worldly wise begetters, plagued themselves to sell her, those good parents, for her good. Whatever eldest born of rank or wealth might lie within their compass, him they lured into their net made pleasant by the baits of gold and beauty, wooing him to woo. So month by month the noise about their doors, and distant blaze of those dull banquets, made the nightly wire of their innocent hair falter before he took it. All in vain. Sullen, defiant, pitying, wroth, returned Leolin's rejected rivals from their suit so often, that the folly-taking wings slipped o'er those lazy limits down the wind with rumor, and became in other fields a mockery to the yeomen over ale, and laughter to their lords. But those at home, as hunters round a hunted creature draw the cordon close and closer toward the death, narrowed her goings out and comings in, forbade her first the house of Averill, then closed her access to the wealthiest farms, last from her own home circle of the poor they barred her, yet she bore it, yet her cheek kept color, wondrous. But, oh mystery! What amulet drew her down to that old oak, so old, that 20 years before, apart falling had let appear the brand of John once grove alike, each huge arm tree, but now the broken base of a black tower, a cave of talcwood, with a single flourishing spray. There the manorial lord too curiously raking in that millennial talcwood dust found for himself a bitter treasure trove. Burst his own wyvern on a seal, and read writhing a letter from his child, for which came at the moment Leolin's emissary, a crippled lad, and coming termed to fly, but scared with threats of jail and halter gave to him that flustered his poor parish wits the letter which he brought, and swore besides to play their go-between as heretofore, nor let them know themselves betrayed, and then, soul-stricken at their kindness to him, went hating his own lean heart and miserable. Thenceforward oft from out a despot dream panting he woke, and oft as early as dawn aroused the Black Republic on his elms, sweeping the froth fly from the fescue, brushed through the dim meadow toward his treasure trove, seized it, took home, and to my lady, who made a downward crescent of her minion mouth, listless in all despondence, reed and tower, as if the living passion symbol there were living nerves to feel the rent, and burned, now chafing at his own great self-defied, now striking on huge stumbling blocks of scorn in babyisms, and dear diminutives scattered all over the vocabulary of such a love as like a chidden babe, after much wailing, hushed itself at last hopeless of answer. Then though Averill wrote and bade him with good heart sustain himself all would be well, the lover heeded not, but passionately restless came and went, and rustling once at night about the place, Thereby a keeper shot at, slightly hurt, raging returned he, nor was it well for her kept to the garden now, and grove of pines, watched he even there? And one was set to watch the watcher, and Sir Aylmer watched he them all, yet bitterer from his readings, once indeed, warmed he with his wines, or taking pride in her, she looked he so sweet, he kissed he her tenderly not knowing what possessed he him, that one kiss was Llewellyn's one strong rival upon earth. Seconded, for my lady followed he suit, seemed he hope's returning rose, and then ensued the Martin's summer of his faded love, or ordeal by kindness. After this he seldom crossed his child without a sneer. The mother flowed he in shallower acrimonies, never one kindly smile, one kindly word, so that the gentle creature shut from all her charitable use, and face to face with 20 months of silence, slowly lost nor greatly cared to lose, her hold on life. Last, some low fever ranging round to spy the weakness of a people or a house, like flies that haunt a wound, or deer, or men, or almost all that is, hurting the hurt save Christ as we believe him found the girl and flung her down upon a couch of fire, or careless of the household faces near, and crying upon the name of Llewellyn, she, and with her the race of Aylmer, passed. Star to star vibrates light, may soul to soul strike through a finer element of her own? So, from afar, touch us at once? Or why that night, that moment, when she named his name, did the keen shriek yes love, yes Edith, yes, shrill, till the comrade of his chambers woke, and came upon him half arisen from sleep, with a weird bright eye, sweating and trembling, his hair as it were crackling into flames, his body half flung forward in pursuit, and his long arms stretched as to grasp a flyer, nor knew he wherefore he had made the cry. And being much befooled and idioted by the rough amity of the other, sank as into sleep again. The second day, my lady's Indian kinsman rushing in, a breaker of the bitter news from home, found a dead man, a letter edged with death beside him, and the dagger which himself gave Edith, reddnd with no bandit's blood, from Edith was engraven on the blade. Then Averill went and gazed upon his death. And when he came again, his flock believed beholding how the years which are not time's had blasted him that many thousand days were clipped by horror from his term of life. Yet the sad mother, for the second death scarce touched her through the nearness of the first, and being used to find her pastor texts, sent to the harrowed brother, praying him to speak before the people of her child, and fixed the Sabbath. Darkly that day rose, autumn's mock sunshine of the faded woods was all the life of it. For hard on these, a breathless burthen of low-folded heaven stifled and chilled at once, but every roof sent out a listener. Many too had known Edith among the hamlets round, and since the parents' harshness and the hapless loves and double death were widely murmured left their own grey tower, or plain-faced tabernacle, to hear him. All in mourning these, and those with blots of it about them, ribbon, glove or kerchief. While the church, one night, except for greenish glimmerings through the lancets, made still paler the pale head of him, who towered above them, with his hopes in either grave. Long o'er his bent brows lingered Averill, his face magnetic to the hand from which livid he plucked it forth, and labored through his brief prayer prelude, gave the verse behold, your house is left unto you desolate. But lapsed into so long a pause again as half amazed half frighted all his flock. Then from his height and loneliness of grief bore down in flood, and dashed his angry heart against the desolations of the world. Never since our bad earth became one sea, which rolling o'er the palaces of the proud, and all but those who knew the living God ate that were left to make a purer world when since had flood, fire, earthquake, thunder wrought such waste and havoc as the idolatries, which from the low light of mortality shot up their shadows to the heaven of heavens, and worshipped their own darkness as the highest. Gash thyself, priest, and honor thy brute Baal, and to thy worse self sacrifice thyself, for with thy worse self hast thou clothed thy God. Then came a Lord in no wise like to Baal. The babe shall lead the lion. Surely now the wilderness shall blossom as the rose. Crown thyself, worm, and worship thine own less. No coarse and blockish god of acreage stands at thy gate for thee to grovel to. Thy God is far diffused in noble groves and princely halls, and farms, and flowing lawns, and heaps of living gold that daily grow, and title scrolls and gorgeous heraldries. In such a shape dost thou behold thy God. Thou wilt not gash thy flesh for him. For thine fares richly, in fine linen, not a hair ruffled upon the scarf skin, even while the deathless ruler of thy dying house is wounded to the death that cannot die. And though thou numberest with the followers of one who cried, leave all and follow me. Thee therefore with his light about thy feet, thee with his message ringing in thine ears, thee shall thy brother man, the Lord from heaven, born of the village girl, carpenter's son, wonderful, Prince of Peace, the mighty God, count the more base idolater of the two. Crueler, as not passing through the fire bodies, but souls thy children as through the smoke, the blight of low desires darkening thine own to thine own likeness. Or if one of these, thy better born unhappily from thee, should, as by miracle, grow straight and fair friends, I was bid to speak of such a one by those who most have cause to sorrow for her, fairer than Rachel by the palmy well, fairer than Ruth among the fields of corn, fair as the angel that said hail she seemed who entering filled the house with sudden light. For so mine own was bright and where indeed the roof so lowly but that beam of heaven dawned sometime through the doorway? Who's the babe too ragged to be fondled on her lap, warmed at her bosom? The poor child of shame, the common care whom no one cared for, leapt to greet her, wasting his forgotten heart, as with a mother he had never known, in gambols. For her fresh and innocent eyes had such a star of morning in their blue, that all neglected places of the field broke into nature's music when they saw her. Low was her voice, but one mysterious way through the sealed ear to which a latter one was all but silence free of alms. Her hand, the hand that robed your cottage walls with flowers, has often toiled to clothe your little ones. How often placed upon the sick man's brow cooled it, or laid his favor's pillow smooth. Had you one sorrow and she shared it not? One burthen and she would not lighten it? One spiritual doubt she did not soothe? Or when some heat of difference sparkled out, how sweetly would she glide between your wraths, and steal you from each other. For she walked wearing the light yoke of the Lord of love, who stilled the rolling wave of Galilee. And one of him I was not bid to speak was always with her, whom you also knew. Him too you loved, for he was worthy love. And these had been together from the first. They might have been together till the last. Friends, this frail bark of ours, when sorely tried, may wreck itself without the pilot's guilt, without the captain's knowledge. Hope with me. Whose shame is that, if he went hence with shame? Nor mine the fault, if losing both of these I cry to vacant chairs and widowy walls, my house is left unto me desolate. While thus he spoke, his hearers wept. But some, sons of the glebe, with other frowns than those that neat themselves for summer's shadow, scowled at their great lord. He, when it seemed he saw no pale sheet lightnings from afar, but forked of the near storm, and aiming at his head, sat anger charmed from sorrow, soldier-like, erect, but when the preacher's cadence flowed softening through all the gentle attributes of his lost child, the wife, who watched his face, paled at a sudden twitch of his iron mouth. And oh pray God that he hold up, she thought, or surely I shall shame myself in him. Now yours the blame, for who beside your hearths can take her place, if echoing me you cry our house is left unto us desolate? But thou, O thou that killest, hadst thou known, O thou that stonest, hadst thou understood the things belonging to thy peace and ours. Is there no prophet but the voice that calls doom upon kings, or in the waste repent? Is not our own child on the narrow way, who down to those that saunter in the broad cries, come up hither, as a prophet to us? Is there no stoning save with flint and rock? Yes, as the dead we weep, for testify no desolation but by sword and fire. Yes, as your mournings witness, and myself am more nellier, darker, earthlier for my loss. Give me your prayers, for he is past your prayers, not past the living fount of pity in heaven. But I that thought myself long-suffering, meek, exceeding poor in spirit, how the words have twisted back upon themselves, and mean vileness, we are grown so proud I wished my voice a rushing tempest, that the wrath of God to blow these sacrifices through the world sent like the 12 divided concubine to inflame the tribes. But there out yonder earth lightens from her own central hollow, there the red fruit of an old idolatry, the heads of chiefs and princes fall so fast, They cling together in the ghastly sack, the land all shambles, naked marriages flash from the bridge, and ever murder de France, by shores that darken with the gathering wolf, runs in a river of blood to the sick sea. Is this a time to madden madness then? Was this a time for these to flaunt their pride? Mayfair's darkness, folds as dense as those which hid the holiest from the people's eyes, or the great death, shroud this great sin from all. Doubtless our narrow world must canvass it. Oh, rather pray for those and pity them, who through their own desire accomplished bring their own grey hairs with sorrow to the grave, who broke the bond which they desired to break, which else had linked their race with times to come, who wove coarse webs to snare her purity, grossly contriving their dear daughter's good poor souls, and knew not what they did, but sat ignorant, devising their own daughter's death. May not thou earthly chastisement suffice? Have not our love and reverence left them bare? Will not another take their heritage? Will there be children's laughter in their hall forever and forever, or one stone left on another, or is it a light thing that their guest, their host, their ancient friend, I made by these the last of all my race, must cry to these the last of theirs, as cried Christ or his agony to those that swore not by the temple but the gold, and made their own traditions God, and slew the Lord, and left their memories a world's curse. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate? Ended he had not, but she brooked no more. Long since her heart had beat remorselessly, her cramped up sorrow pained her, and a sense of meanness in her unresisting life. Then their eyes vexed her, for on entering he had cast the curtains of their seat aside, black velvet of the costliest she herself had seen to that. Fain had she closed them now, yet dared not stir to do it, only neared her husband inch by inch. But when she laid, wife-like, her hand in one of his, he veiled his face with the other, and at once, as falls a creeper when the prop is broken, fell the woman shrieking at his feet, and swooned. Then her own people bore her along the nave, her pendant hands, and ne'er a meagre face seemed with the shallow cares of 50 years, and here the lord of all the landscape round went to its last horizon, and of all who peered at him so keenly, followed out tall and erect, but in the middle aisle reeled as a foot ox in crowded ways, stumbling across the market to his death, unpitied. For he groped as blind, and seemed always about to fall, grasping the pews and oaken finials till he touched the door. Yet to the like gate, where his chariot stood, strode from the porch, tall and erect again. But nevermore did either pass the gate save under pall with bearers. In 1 month, through weary and yet wearier hours, the childless mother went to seek her child. And when he felt the silence of his house about him, and the change and not the change, and those fixed eyes of painted ancestors staring forever from their gilded walls on him, their last descendant, his own head began to droop, to fall. The man became imbecile. His one word was desolate. Dead for 2 years before his death was he. But when the second Christmas came, escaped his keepers, and the silence which he felt, to find a deeper in the narrow gloom by wife and child. No one at his end the dark retinue reverencing death at golden thresholds. Nor from tender hearts, and those who sorrowed o'er a vanished race, pity, the violet on the tyrant's grave. Then the great hall was wholly broken down, and the broad woodland parcelled into farms. And where the two contrived their daughter's good, lies the hawk's cast. The mole has made his run, the hedgehog underneath the plantain bores, the rabbit fondles his own harmless face, the slow worm creeps, and the thin weasel there follows the mouse, and all is open field.